So, welcome to the Energy Saving Podcast. I'm George Ablett, the Energy Saving Specialist for the Council, and I'm pleased to welcome back Mark Thompson, who volunteers as a community energy coach, providing advice to the residents in the borough.
Hi, George.
Hi, Mark. We've had some people asking us about vampire devices around the home. Those items that could be using up lots of energy when they're on standby. So, that is going to be one of the topics we're going to cover in this particular edition. So, Mark, what exactly is a vampire device, and are they as bad as the media have been making out?
So a vampire device is any electrical item that's sat there using a little bit of energy and it's not actually doing anything obviously that's benefiting you. Or it might be doing something very small that's benefiting you, that's actually using a lot of energy to do that. So examples of things that people talk about a lot are things like mobile phone chargers and those sorts of things. But it could be a clock, for example, that is actually giving you some useful benefit, but actually it might be using a lot more energy than it really needs to for that particular job.
Okay, so it sounds as though it's quite small, but how big a problem is it for the homeowner?
It used to be a really big problem. Before 2009, there was no legislation, there was no requirements on any manufacturers to do anything on this sort of stuff. So before 2009, it was a bit like the Wild West. And there were some horror stories of stuff that used to consume huge amounts of electricity for no real gain. But from 2009, there was legislation introduced across Europe, which got tighter in 2013, and it got tighter again in 2017. So really, if you buy something that's very, very new, certainly anything less than 10 years old, with a few exceptions, it will actually use very, very little energy. So if you take a large television, for example, on standby these days, it's not allowed to use more than £1.50's worth of energy a year. And that's the same for almost all electrical items are sort of bound by that legislation. So over the years, it's got a lot better. So it's generally an issue with older stuff. And there are a few exceptions we can talk about today as well.
That's great, Mark. But with the increase in energy costs to the homeowner, it's really worthwhile, presumably everyone, at least checking to see what their devices are. And what type of items around the house could be using the most out of the devices we've just talked about?
So there'll certainly be older things that will be lingering around homes that will probably be quite energy hungry. So things like old PC monitors that are certainly more than 10 years old. If you've got an old DVD player or one of these sort of set-top video recording boxes that's quite old, that will probably be quite energy hungry. If you've got an old kitchen hi-fi that's sat there, it's got a clock on it all the time and you just use it occasionally, that can actually be quite hungry because that's the sort of thing that could be easily 10, 15, 20 years old. Rechargeable stuff that you might have lurking around, rechargeable torches, rechargeable hoovers that are old, rechargeable radios, rechargeable cordless drills in the garage, or anything that's 10 years or more old is probably pretty energy hungry, or there's a good chance that it could be, and it's worth checking. So the ways you can check it are, there's three ways really. One is, the simplest one, if it's a small item, is it getting warm? Is the plug adapter, the black chunky things we see plugged into the wall, is that warm? If that's warm, that's wasting energy. If it's cold, then it's not wasting energy at all. So go around touching stuff, and if it feels warm, it's using energy that it doesn't need to, so switch it off. So the sort of key message here is only switch off the things that you need to switch off, and don't worry about switching everything off, because most things are quite good, but only switch off the things that feel warm. So go around, test with your hand. That's a simple way of doing it, and there's a guide on my website which I know we're going to plug later on how to do this. And then there are other ways you can do it. You can use your smart meter if you've got a smart meter with an in-home display. You can go around turning things on and off and seeing if that makes a difference to the electricity consumption in the house. You need to have the house quite low in terms of how much electricity it's using when you're doing that, so you can sort of spot the difference. So you need to make sure you haven't got the oven on, or your or any electric heaters on, or your immersion on. So to turn off any big stuff like that, and fridges and freezers if you can do as well, but that's not so much of a problem. So turn off the big stuff, and then turn on your to look at your in-home display, and switch items off, then on again, off then on again a few times, and wait a few seconds and see if it makes a difference to the display on your smart meter in-home display. And if it doesn't, then you don't really need to worry. And then the other way you can do it is by buying one of these plug-in devices that you plug into the wall, and you can plug your electrical item into the back of this device, and it will tell you really accurately how much energy something is using. And you can actually program it with what your tariff is, and it will tell you how much stuff is being consumed. So that's for people that are a bit geeky like me. Those gadgets are at for £15–20, so it's quite an investment, but it certainly can be quite fun using one of those to actually understand really what something is using. I mentioned there are some exceptions to Vampire Power. The exceptions fall into two categories really. One is things that are network connected and connected to the internet. So older smart TVs. So smart TVs that are sort of more than 5 years old could be quite energy hungry. Certainly printers that are Wi-Fi connected that are more than 5 years old can be quite energy hungry. And then there are a few other exceptions which sort of slip between the cracks here in this whole stuff. One is games consoles. Now gamers, I'm not a gamer, but I can understand gamers really like to be able to go to their games console, press a button, and then be playing within seconds. But the standby mode on games can be really, really poor, particularly even on some of the new ones. So the new ones these days often have two standby modes. They've got a regular standby mode, and they've got a super eco standby mode. And if you've only got it in the regular standby mode on a games console, for some of them it can be consuming between £25 and £40 a year just sat there. So if you've got a teenager or kids in the house that are into their games consoles and they haven't been playing with them for a while, and you want to know whether they're consuming much energy sat there, just do the touch test. Put your hand on them and feel how warm they are. And if they're sat there quietly warm and warming your hand up nicely, then actually they're not in the proper eco standby mode. So either have a word with your teenager and insist that he selects the eco standby mode button option, or just turn it off at the wall. And then there are a couple of other things that might be lurking in the background as Vampire energy use. One is hi-fi, sound bars, anything like an audio system that's connected to your telly. When you turn your telly off, it sits there very quietly. You might forget to turn your amplifier off. I've got one of these things. So that could easily be costing £10, £15, £20 a year sat there. And then there's one big one, which people don't think of it as a Vampire Power energy wastage thing, but it's actually your hot water tank. If you've got an electric immersion and you've got your water on constant, you will be wasting somewhere between £80 and £120 a year on your electricity bill just by keeping that hot water tank permanently hot. So if you've got it set on constant, don't put it on timer for morning and evening or whatever. And even if you've got a gas heating for your hot water tank, you'll still be wasting between £30 and £40 a year just by keeping that tank hot. So that's also a Vampire loss. It's just not giving you any value. So do think about that if you've got a hot water tank that's sitting there permanently at hot temperature.
Thanks, Mark. There's some really good tips there, and just covering those in brief, just to summarise them. Off at the wall is absolutely the best option for making sure you're not using the Vampire device, and to just check how something warm is in order to see whether it's on or not and using energy. The plug-in device for those who are for those of us who are a bit geeky around it, and if you can, most energy suppliers are supplying smart meters now with no extra costs. So you just ask your supplier for a smart meter, and they'll generally install them. There are a few prepayment ones. They can also be smart these days. So check those smart meters, check those devices, and switch it off if you don't need it.
Yeah, and I'd also mention. So I also sell smart meters. You know, my parents have got one. They're in their 80s now, and they've got an in-home display. And actually, they are quite excited by seeing what's going on. You know, they feel actually they know what their energy use is for the first time, and it's great to see them say, well, why has that gone up? And why has this figure gone up on here? And then they're going around the house and they're working it out and they're making decisions off the back of that. So I know there's a lot of people that are worried about smart meters and so on, but actually they do provide you really, really useful information about what's going on around your house in terms of energy.
That's brilliant, Mark. And even, you know, picking up these few bits and reducing your energy bill overall, it can all help, can't it?
Yes. Yeah, it's looking after the pounds, and the pennies and the pounds look after themselves.
Absolutely. And just linked to, you mentioned one of the big consumer devices potentially is the hot water tank. So linked to that, if you've not got a new hot water tank, just make sure it's well insulated and it will retain that heat as and when you heat it in the morning and the evening, just keeping that hot water hot for a longer period of time.
Yeah, and like all the pipes going to it, anything that's getting hot around your tank is wasting energy, leaking it into the house. It's in a part of the house that's, you know, it's of no interest to you. You don't live in the airing cupboard. So if you can feel something warm, flag it. www.getenergysavvy.info. It's a website I do purely for information for people. It's all very practical, very straightforward, very plain English about energy in the home, and I do it completely for free. It's just a hobby, just to help people.
Thanks, Mark. Again, brilliant talking to you.
Thanks, George. Cheers.